Dear students and the subscribers of StudyIQ, welcome to the next lecture on our series Ethical Case Studies. So, as I already said that this series is to help the students preparing for the civil service examination, especially to approach the case studies. As I already discussed, case study is not part of the formal education in our country, and students are facing tremendous problems when it comes to the ethical case studies. And I would say that they are clean bowled some of the times, most of the students, as to how to approach these case studies. And that is why we have taken up this initiative of solving all the previous year case studies. And then apart from that, we will also take up some of the important societal issues as we progress. We will make cases out of those things and we will come out with those case studies. Now, what is the idea to solve the case studies? And as you will progress, you will also have an understanding as to how to approach the case studies, what we will have to understand when we take up a particular case study, and how to think on the various directives given in the case study. So, that is the idea behind this particular series. So, today an important and interesting case is in front of you, and this case study has been asked in the prelims examination, in the mains examination 2021. And what is this case all about? Let me just give a brief about this particular case study. And before I get into the case study, before we discuss the brief of this particular case study, this is Babu. I am also the faculty for Indian Polity and Governance for the English channel, and also I deal with ethical case studies. Probably in the future, I'll also take up some of the topics in ethics as well. So, that is what I wanted to say before we begin with this particular case study. So, let us proceed further. Let us try to understand as to what exactly is the brief of this particular case study. So, you will have to put yourself in this particular case study, put yourself in this position. The case study says that you are an administrative officer in a public hospital, in a government hospital, and all the things that I am going to discuss happens around the situation of COVID. The COVID pandemic has struck India, not only India, the entire world, and you are an administrative officer in a government hospital, and the COVID infection is spreading fast despite a lot of measures that has been taken by the government, and despite all the efforts, the infection rate is increasing. And in fact, the government has also imposed what is called as a forced lockdown for around 2 months. Despite that, the infection rate is continuing. And because of the COVID, number of changes also happens. That's if, for example, the education system has gone for a change. The education service has gone for a change. The teaching and the learning methods, the evaluation process, the certification process, everything has gone for a change. So are the other services. And the government also feels that they are not prepared enough to face this particular challenge. There is a resource constraints when it comes to every services, in every sector this problem is there. And because of the infection, there is a lot of people who are getting admitted in the hospital. Day in, day out, people are getting admitted in the hospital. And one thing that you see about this COVID has affected people without any discrimination. No discrimination on the grounds of religion, race, caste, or on the grounds of haves and have-nots. That is the most important thing that you have to take into consideration. That disease does not see that who is having money and who is not having the money. Under these circumstances, people are coming to the hospital. So, now you as an administrative officer, what are the various criteria that you would see to treat these people who are getting into the hospital with infection, and what kind of justifications you would put? Because you as an administrative officer, you also feel that the resources that you have got is very limited in terms of both clinical and the non-clinical staffs, and also the other resources like, let us assume, the ambulances and the medical equipments. So, these are all very limited at your disposal. And on the one hand, by putting the staffs in the treatment, you are also risking your own personnel, and the resources are very limited. And despite all these challenges, what are the various criteria you will see to treat the people who are coming into the hospital? Are you going to make a special direction in this regard? And what kind of justification you will give for the treatment that you are going to administer? Or if at all you are coming out with some policy decisions, what kind of justifications you will give for that? And then the second directives in this particular question is, suppose you are also, let us assume, an administrative officer in a private hospital. Will you do the same? Will you follow the same criteria and will you give the same justification? So, very good case study in my opinion, because it's a little ambiguous also, and it is very difficult to answer such questions. So, let us just proceed further. Let us try to understand this particular case study. So, before I get into the case study, so what exactly is a case study? So, this is something that I keep telling in every lecture, because you'll have to understand as to what is the reason behind this case study. Now, case study is a set of issue that is presented in front of you. It might have a lot of ethical issues, it might have certain legal issues. So, whatever is the issue, a set of issues are presented in front of the aspirants who are aspiring to become the civil servants, and that the case study will also have an impact on number of stakeholders. It can have an impact on the life of number of people involved in that particular case. Now, under such a situation, as an administrator, how good you are in solving that particular issue, or what are the factors that you take into consideration in arriving at a solution to this particular issue. So, UPSC wanted to assess your mental caliber, UPSC wanted to assess your attitude towards these issues. UPSC wanted to have an understanding as to what kind of understanding you have about these societal issues around you and how you would act under such a circumstances. So, this is a way of assessing your, I would say, your attitude. This is a way of assessing your decision making ability. This is a way of assessing your entire personality in the form of case study, and that is why this has been introduced from 2013. So, to understand these things and to approach the case studies effectively, you should not only be ethically good, I would say, it is not only you should have the right attitude, it is also that you should be very sensitive to the issues in the society, and you should possess certain values which is expected from a civil servant. And apart from that, you should also be generally aware of the various legal mechanisms in our society or the laws in our country. So, that will help you to write a better answer. All right. So, first thing that you have to do is read and reread. Try to understand the case study completely. Do not make any assumptions. If there is any vagueness, let it remain, and you approach the case study from that angle itself. So, but do not fill that vacuum by yourself, or your language has to be in such a way, because of such a lacuna or because of such an ambiguity. I am assuming because of the ambiguity. So, maybe if it is like this, this is the response. So, you have to tone down your answers in such a way. All right. So, try to read, reread, do not make any assumptions, and then try to understand what is the broader theme from which the case study has been asked. So, once you do all those things, then it will be easy for you to approach a case study. So, come to this question now. Let me just quickly go through the question. So, the coronavirus disease, that is COVID-19 pandemic, has quickly spread to the various countries. As on May 8, 2020, in India, around 56,342 positive cases of corona had been reported. India, with a population of more than 1.35 billion, had difficulty in controlling the transmission of coronavirus among its population. Multiple strategies become necessary to handle this outbreak. Of course, because no country in the world was ready for this, and hence multiple strategies from different institutions, from different parts or different angles, has to be taken into consideration. The Ministry of Health and Family Welfare of India raised awareness about this outbreak and to take all necessary actions to control the spread of COVID-19. Indian government implemented a 55-day lockdown throughout the country to reduce the transmission of the virus. Schools and colleges had shifted to alternative mode of teaching, learning, evaluation and certification. Online mode became popular during these days. India was not prepared for a sudden onslaught of such a crisis due to limited infrastructure in terms of human resource, money and other facilities needed for taking care of the situation. This disease did not spare anybody, irrespective of the caste, creed, religion on the one hand, and the haves and have-nots on the other. So, this is very, very important. This is one of the major ethical issues, and this is one of the important factor that you have to take into consideration as an administrative officer. What kind of decisions will you make? Because it's a disease does not see whether somebody is rich or poor. The disease does not see depending upon your caste. On the one hand, it appears that it is good that it is not discriminating, but on the other hand, people who are not having the money, how would they take the treatment? How they can afford for the treatment? But right to life is a fundamental right for everyone, and everybody life is as precious as the other, whether they are haves or have-nots, irrespective of the caste and all those things. So, this is one of the important factor probably as an administrative officer you will have to take into consideration before making a decision. Deficiencies in the hospital beds, oxygen cylinders, ambulances, hospital staffs and crematorium. So, crematorium is a place where people will be cremated when they die. So, this is a place where they may be buried and the other rituals might happen, where most of the crucial aspects. So, that means on the one hand there is resource constraints, but there is lot of people getting affected without any discrimination and also without seeing whether they are haves or have nots. You are a hospital administrator in a public hospital. So, you are there in a part of a government hospital and you are an administrative officer. So, you will have to decide a number of things under the circumstances. At the time when coronavirus had attacked a large number of people and patients were pouring into the hospital day in and day out. So, continuously people are coming out, they are getting affected, infected. But on the one hand, the resource at your disposal is very, very less, and you cannot risk those resources also, because there is a possibility that the clinical and non-clinical staffs can also get infected because of the disease. So, what is the direct in the question? So, what are your criteria and justification? So, what kind of criteria and justification you will give for treating the people, and what kind of criteria will you follow in treating the people? So, will you treat everyone without any discrimination, or will you have any discrimination? So, what kind of criteria and what kind of justifications are you going to put for putting your clinical and non-clinical staff to attend the patients, knowingly fully well that it is highly infectious disease and resources and infrastructure are limited? So, there are two-prong difficulties for you. So, there is exactly a dilemma here for you to deal. So, first of all, what is the criteria and the justification you will give? So, are you going to discriminate? What is the criteria that you are going to follow to treat these people? And then what is the kind of justification you will give for that? And also what justification you will give for putting your own people in risk, both clinical and non-clinical staffs? Is it okay for you to put them at risk when especially the resources are very, very limited? So, you will have to discuss all these things, alright. So, we will try to understand all those things. Now, the next thing is, if yours is a private hospital, so now you are an administrator, let us assume. You are an administrator in a government hospital. So, the government value system is a little different from that of a private organization or a private hospital. So, if you are a private hospital, yours is a private hospital, whether your justifications and decisions would remain the same as that of the public hospital. Now, whenever you approach a case study, you will have to approach a case study in such a way that you should be sensible enough and you should be practical enough. Now, just for impressing someone, you cannot write the answer. Just for impressing the evaluator, you cannot write the answer when you know that it is not a completely a true one. So, you will have to be sensible enough, you will have to understand, and it is also very true that the value system upon which the government hospital and the private hospital function, they are completely on a different lines. So, your answer need not be same. So, try to be as far as possible practical also in your answer, but you can tone down a little in such a way that the answers appears good. So, let us see as to how to approach both these directives. So, but before I get into the directive, what is the larger subject matter? This is very, very important for you to identify the subject matter on which a case is involved. So, to me, what is a major subject matter? So, one of the important values of a civil servant, because you are part of a hospital, which is a government hospital, and you are an administrator there. So, any government servant, one of the important values of the civil servants, apart from the qualities like being honest, being uh, uh, carrying out your duties with utmost integrity and all those things, one of the important values also that being empathetic and compassionate towards the weaker sections. Empathetic means you put yourselves in their position, you put yourselves in their toes, try to understand their issues and problem, and compassionate, trying to understand their issues, and being compassionate especially who is not well off in the society. So, empathy and compassion, I think, is a very important part of civil servants, and in this case especially, the decision that is to be taken by the administrator has to take into considerations especially these values of a civil servant. And then apart from that, there are also another factor which will determine his action is the ethical concerns and dilemmas in a public and a private institutions. So, whenever you function in a private organization or in a governmental organization, there are certain conduct rules, there are certain value systems within the organization, and we will have to work within that particular ecosystem. So, that will put you, despite you feel that something is ethically right, will you be able to do that in a given circumstances? Because you cannot go against the values of the organization, you cannot go against the rules of the organization. So, the rules, regulations also does influence your behavior. So, it does put you in an ethical dilemma. You are ethically feeling this is right, but it is not right according to the rules of the organization. and hence you will have to take into consideration these things when you decide the things. Okay. So, these are the major subject matters in my opinion, and let us also try to quickly understand the stakeholders involved as to your action, be it a part of a government hospital or be it a part of a private hospital. Your action will have impact upon these categories of people. So, definitely it will have public at large, because the people in that particular locality who are getting affected because of coronavirus, they get admitted. Their life is at stake if the treatment is not given. But if the treatment is given, then probably the hospital staffs, both the clinical and the non-clinical staffs. Clinical staffs are those who directly interact with the patients. Non-clinical staffs are the back-end people, the receptionist probably, and then you have the lab technicians, you have the executive officers. So, all these people are part of the non-clinical staffs. So, they will also come in contact with the other clinical staff. So, they are also at risk. And then the next stakeholder is the hospital management and yourself, because the hospital management will have certain rules and regulations, and you are the administrative officer, you are the one who has to implement it, but at the same time you will have to be compassionate and empathetic towards the sections of the society. And apart from all these things, it is the responsibility of the government to safeguard and to protect its citizens. So, these are all the various stakeholders involved in this particular process. So, with this information, let us just get into quickly the first directive that is given in the question. A very good question in my opinion, because it is not very easy to answer such a question. Alright. So, just look into the question. So, what is the directive saying? What are your criteria and justifications for putting your clinical and non-clinical staffs to attend the patients, knowing fully well that it is highly infectious disease and resources and infrastructures are limited. So, that itself is putting a lot of dilemma upon you. Now, what kind of criteria and justification people are falling in day out, getting admitted into the hospital. So, whom will you treat first? There are a lot of people, but your resources are very limited. So, is it not will amount to discrimination of the people if you are not following the first come first serve basis? Will you follow the first come first serve basis because it's a deadly disease, or will you follow certain other criteria in treating them? If you make your staffs to treat them, then they are also put in risk. So, what kind of justification will you give? And then your resources is very limited. So, probably it is an implied understanding that not everybody coming to the hospital may be treated. And at the same time, you have to protect your clinical and non-clinical staffs also. So, under such a circumstances, what are the possible criteria you will take into account, and what kind of justifications you will give to put them into the line of work? So, let us try to understand that very quickly. So, first thing is, what is a major thing that is involved as an administrative officer here? You have to be compassionate and empathetic towards the people. In general towards the public, but you will have to be even more compassionate towards the weaker sections and the people who are vulnerable in the society. So, probably as an administrative officer, what you can do, or in this case, if I put myself, what I can do is that in this case, there is a possibility that I can go for what is called as positive discrimination. Now, Article 14 of the Constitution allows for what is called as the positive discrimination. So, the equals can be treated equally. So, what about haves and have-nots? Because this is affecting both the haves and have-nots. But haves, if not in the government hospital, they can take admissions in the private hospital also. It does not mean that I am going to turn down everybody who is haves, or I have the profiling to do that. But as far as possible, in a given circumstances, the vulnerable sections has to be given the priority. Because in this case, if you ask me, the justification for this is that the Constitution allows for what is called as social justice. The Constitution allows for what is called as positive discrimination. So, what is social justice? Now, social justice is that the policies can discriminate positively. Suppose if somebody is not equally placed in the society, so there can be some kind of positive discrimination in order to ensure social justice, and that social justice will take care of the disadvantage that they have, because they belong to a so-called backward community, or they belong to backward sections, or they are not educated, or they are not economically advanced. So, all these people are backward and they are deprived of certain privileges, and hence some kind of positive discrimination can be done, because otherwise they will not be able to get treated elsewhere. But it is not the case with the people who are haves, or who are having the wealth, or who are possessing the wealth to deal with all these things, and hence that has to be taken into consideration. All right. So, before I proceed with that, and then what is the important criteria here, or important justification for any of my actions would be whatever risk that I take and expose my clinical and non-clinical staffs is that first of all, they are duty bound. It is their professional ethics to deal with such things. And then the second thing, it is also the responsibility of the government to protect the life of the people. In fact, it is their fundamental right. And hence, everything has to be done within the capacity of the government to protect the life of the patients. So, these are the justifications. I will just further proceed. But before that, let us try to understand first the criteria as to who shall be treated and what kind of criteria may be followed. So, first thing it has to be seen is the vulnerability of the patients who are more vulnerable. So, they have to be given priority in my opinion. So, when I say vulnerable, the age may be taken into consideration. People with comorbidity, so people who are having multiple diseases, because they are the most vulnerable for the COVID disease, so they have to be given priority. Children, women and weaker sections and in others. And I think in this order, probably more or less in this order, the priority has to be given by the administrative officers. So, such a direction may be passed so that you can take care, because here you cannot go for what is called as the first come first serve. Somebody is healthy enough, somebody who can withstand, somebody who can normally recover, but somebody who requires an immediate treatment. So, you will have to prioritize the way that you are going to treat. So, this criteria is very, very important in my opinion. And then the second thing is, even if the patients are vulnerable, you will have to also see as to what are the chances of their survival. So, the doctors might know as to what are the chances of the survival on a preliminary inquiry, and accordingly you will have to use your resource, because the resources like the oxygen supply, the resources like the beds, so these are all very limited, and hence you will have to use that productively. It is a very difficult decision to take, I understand that, because you cannot value the life of one to be more important than the value of others, but given a situation, under this situation, as a leader you will have to decide. And what could be the best ethical approach in this situation? Let us assume that as an leader in this particular situation is a maximum benefit for maximum number of people. You will have to think that what or how you can maximize the benefit to the maximum number of people, and that is a justification I would say. Of course, I am not saying it is ethically right that someone might be allowed to die, but you will have to see how you can benefit the maximum people. And then the availability of resource, then the next thing is whatever decision that you take, it is also based on the availability of resources. That is also an important factor. And then whatever decision that you take is also based on the safety of your staffs. Is it going to expose them to more risk? And if they are exposed to more risk, then you are already at a larger risk, because you do not have the resources to meet the further demands. And hence that should also be taken into account. And then of course, the kind of decision that you are taking, some kind of positive discrimination that you are making, is because of as a civil servant you are also supposed to have empathy and compassion towards the weaker sections, and hence you can make this positive discrimination. And the other justification is already discussed. You do not have to worry about exposing your clinical and non-clinical staffs to the treatment of the patients. It is their professional ethics, it is part of your professional ethics, their professional ethics, it is part of their duty to perform these things. In fact, as a doctor, it is their duty, it is their responsibility to perform all those things, and even if they have to risk their life in the line of duty. So, it is not something which is morally wrong for you to give the directions, but rather they have to perform all those things, because that is part of their duty, and that is what the oath that they have taken before they started the practice. And then the next justification is also that you can make a little bit of discriminatory practices, the positive discrimination, because it is also the agenda of the government. As an officer, you should also carry forward the idea of social justice. And whatever decision that you take is, it is based on what is called as the maximum benefit to maximum number of people. So, it may not be completely a right thing, but you are doing the most possible or the best thing in a given situation. So, there is no complete right answer in such a case, because it is only a relative concept. You are trying to do the best in a given circumstances. Alright, so these are the various criteria and the justification that you can give, and you can also think a lot of other things as a part of this particular question. Now, come to the next directive in the question. If yours is a private hospital, because here it is a private hospital, it is not a government hospital, whether your justifications and decisions would remain the same as that of the public hospital. Now, this is something that you have to think. Now, before we understand, first we will have to understand as to what is the difference between a public hospital and a private hospital. Can you do the same thing both in a public and a private hospital is something that you have to understand. And only when you understand that, you can understand and you can go ahead and you can answer this particular directive. So, as someone who is preparing for civil service, you should first know that the private and the public hospital does not work on the same value system. The value systems may be completely different. So, you as an administrative officer in a public hospital have already decided, but as in a private hospital, you have a lot of restrictions because the value system is not the same. So, let us try to understand as to what kind of dilemmas you will have to face in deciding this particular thing. So, what are the dilemmas? First of all, if you see that in a private hospital versus a public hospital, or in a public hospital versus a private hospital, the public hospital mostly works on a service motive. What is the motive? The service to the people. They may be a free services, they may not even charge. And when it comes to the private hospitals, I am not saying every private hospital, but majorly their value system is based on what? Profit. They have to make a profit because they have a restriction also. They have to take care of their employees, they have to pay everyone on time. And in the government can mobilize resources from other means, and the government have a number of other means also to decide and to take care of all those things, but that is not the case. So, I am not completely blaming a private organization. They have to make profit in order to run the organization profitably. That is very, very important. So, public versus private, so this basic difference is there. So, this will also influence accordingly, the rules will be there. So, as an administrative officer, you are not the owner of that hospital, you are just an administrative officer employed in that particular hospital. So, you are bound by the rules of that particular hospital. So, that is one thing that is going to impact your decision. And then there is also a difference between civil service values and the values in the private institution. While compassion and empathy is to be inherent in a civil servant, is it compassion and empathy is something which is also will be part of a private institution? I'm not saying it will not be there, but will it be given priority in decision making is something that you'll have to take into account. All right. Then the next thing is, so that is what I'm saying. So the values in a civil service organization, or the values in civil service, is relatively different than values in the private institutions, because compassion and empathy can be there in the civil services, but as a private organization, as someone who is an administrator in a private organization or a private hospital, so here you will have to take care of the interest of the management. So, you as an administrative officer in a private hospital, will you be able to do all those things? I doubt that you will be able to do all the things that you have done in a government organization, and you can openly accept that also. There is nothing wrong about it. So, because in a private organization, somewhere they have to balance between their profit making and the interest of the society as well. So, as far as I am concerned, if the rules are flexible, if the management has given you some kind of flexibility in dealing because it is an emergency situation, and even the private organization, they also have the responsibility towards the society. So, if that kind of flexibility is given, yes, still you can go for some element of positive discrimination. Certain quota may be devised, and that may be given to the vulnerable sections. But definitely, yes, the private organization is also going to take care of the people who are having the money, and they are going to give priority to the people who are going to have the money, and that is something that you cannot deny it. But at the same time, what you can do, you can also take care of the interest of the vulnerable sections as far as what is within your capacity. So, you can have that thing also, but I doubt that it can be completely same as that what has happened in a public hospital. And at the same time, what you can do here is you can provide better equipments and you can provide better facilities to your clinical and non-clinical staffs, and then you can also ensure that their safety is also taken care of. So, these are the things I think it will little differ when it comes to a private as well as in a public hospital. So, with this we will end our case study. You can put your comments in the comment section if you have any further ideas as to how this particular case study can be approached. And if you want the PPT of this particular presentation, you can get it from my Telegram channel, that is Babu Gunashekaran 337. And if you also wanted to take important questions on current affairs, so from the Hindu newspaper, every day I put 1 or 2 questions in the my Telegram channel, which is very relevant for civil service examination. So, those who are preparing for 2024, you can get access to those questions from my Telegram channel. All right. So, thank you very much for watching this particular video. All the very best. God bless.